Okay, everybody, I am connecting about 30 seconds early just to check my stream. Hey, everyone, how's it going? Let me get my keyboard out of the way. Looks like my sound is up. Okay, so welcome everybody to lesson 1 of the handy dandy bog jacket. I see a lot of people are jumping in already, so I'm going to give them a few seconds. But I see Marie out there, and I see Coffee Alien 6139. I don't know who you are, but I love your name because I'm a coffee alien too. I don't survive without my coffee. All right, everybody. I see, let me see, Malamute Chaser. All right, you guys have some fun names. Anyway, welcome everybody. My name's Yvonne and this is the Jelly Roll Club. And today we're gonna veer away from jelly rolls, but not necessarily, to work on a bog jacket. So this is a great way to use all of the leftover stuff in your sewing room, and there's no waste. You're not throwing stuff away unless you're really skinny and then there's a tiny bit of waste. But everybody, welcome. Hop in there. Just let me know that you're here. If you have questions, I'm going to pause and go into the chat and answer those. And if you're not watching it live, I will read all of the comments and answer those as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that you need is you should have picked up the corrected link from the top of the stream or the chat, but if not, you're just going to go to let me share my desktop, www.jellyrollclub.com, and you're going to see mine. You can find it at the top, and it says Repurpose Quilts. You're going to scroll past Jacket 1 because that one's already finished, and you're going to go down to the No Waste Bog Coat. Lesson 1 is October 26th. Lesson 2 is November 9th. You don't need a handout for that day. And then lesson 3 is optional, and that's November 23rd. Most people should be able to finish their jacket on November the 9th. But if you are a newbie and you want some additional support, I'm going to be adding pockets and doing other stuff on November 23rd. All right, everybody. Hi, Veronica. I see a lot of my friends out there jumping on. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is click on that supply list, and then what it's going to give you is a handout that looks like this. And it says No Waste Bog Jacket, just like this. It's super easy. We're going to be assuming for the purposes of this project that you're using width of fabric that is 42 inches. So if you have fabric that's slightly shorter or longer, I'm going to explain what you need that for. So that width of fabric is important. And so you can use a finished quilt for this. Let's say you have grandma's quilt that's looking a little bit tattered, but you want to do something fun with it. You can also use an old quilt. If you're using an old quilt, you're probably going to need at least a twin size for this project. You can probably get away with a lap, but depending on the size of your finished coat, you may want something else. So let me go ahead and jump in. Your handout looks like this. It has a bunch of little things, some things that I will be referring to, some diagrams, and then it also has a big chart that we're going to use today. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over here, and I went ahead and created a slideshow because I think it's easier for us to follow along on a slideshow, especially if I want to make things big. So today's lesson 1. Welcome to the Jelly Roll Club, and let's go ahead and get started. Supply list. If you don't have the handout, you can pause the video and you can watch this. You're going to need a large fabric rectangle or an old quilt. Now the rectangle, I'm going to show you what size you need. And somebody said that they were reading this as a dog jacket. No, it's a bog jacket. You're going to need washable fabric marker or a colored pencil. I'm just using a white marking pencil, like a Crayola colored pencil. A tape measure, yardstick, or meter stick. Those are super helpful. A piece of cardstock or paper that is 7 inches by 5 inches. And if you're using centimeters, that's like 17.5 centimeters by approximately 12.5 centimeters. Double fold extra wide bias tape for those who are not using a quilt with finished edges, but you don't have to worry about that right now. That's why it's in tiny font. So that is the supply list. The next thing that you're going to need is I need you to understand the basic construction so that you don't get confused, because once you cut, that's it, right? You're measuring multiple times and then you're cutting once. So in lesson 1, you're going to be measuring your body to determine the size of your quilted rectangle. You're going to make a quilted rectangle panel. I'm not going to make that today, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to make mine. Then for lesson 2, you're going to have that marked rectangle. I'm going to make my 3 cuts in lesson 2. I'm going to share the measurements today. So for those of you who are adventurous, you can go ahead and move ahead if you want to. But I'm going to pin it together, test my fit, and sew those seams in lesson 2. Then in lesson 3, I'm going to round my edges, add pockets, etc., etc. So that's what you can expect from the 3 lessons. But today we're going to start by measuring our bodies. So to measure your body, I need you to put this somewhere. And let me see if I can make this here. Let me look at my desktop display. I think it's kind of cutting off some of my text. So let me come up out of here so that it's, there we go. Can you guys see that better? All right. So let me just increase the size a little bit so you guys can see. All right. So to make this, you're going to need to use your width of fabric as your length. That's the length of our coat, right? From the top of the coat down to the bottom. So it's a 42 length coat. If you want it shorter or longer, you may need to buy fabric that's wider. So if you want like a 60 length coat, then that's the length that you use. For the circumference, we're going to be measuring your chest and your hips at the fullest part, whichever one of those it is. If you're a top heavy girl, then that's your widest part. If you got a big bottom girl, then that's your widest part. You're going to add 12 inches to that. And that's going to give you the width of your rectangle. And this ensures that your coat is going to be big enough for you to wear over your clothing, right? You have a handy dandy chart that I've added for this, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the chart. And the chart looks like this. It should be in your handout. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go through this chart with you. And so let me go ahead and show you my handout that's in front of me, and let's go ahead and look at this. All right. So remember, this 42-inch long, and let me see if I can clear that up. It's looking blurry. Let me see if I can autofocus. Can you guys see that better? Sometimes my camera acts a little bit weird. Let me zoom it down and autofocus. Okay, so that should be a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure myself. So the first thing that I need is my tape measure, right? You're going to need this when you're measuring your final one. So I went into my tool room and stole that from my husband. You'll be looking for that later, but not today. So I have an extra long tape measure, and this is the one that I use. This one's like 120 inches. So I use this one as well. But let me go ahead and show you what you're going to be doing. So I'm going to go full size so you can see me. All right. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're just going to measure yourself in 2 places. I'm a top heavy girl. I got some big twins. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to measure myself at my widest point. And so I have to determine this one is my one measurement, and I'm going to write it down. So I'm going to put it on my paper. I'm going to come down here, and my W right now I'm going to use for now is 44, so I'm just going to circle that. That's one of my W's. And then now I'm going to stand back here. I'm going to move my chair so you can see me. I've got my hips now, and I need to see which one of these 2 measurements is the widest. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to this one. And it looks like I'm basically the same. So I'm kind of a square. So my widest point is not here, and my widest point is not here. So measure those 2, and whichever one is wider is the W that we're going to be using for this jacket. So there's not a size guide in this handout because it just depends on your measurements. That is the W. So let me go ahead and roll this up, and let me show you what you do next. So after you have your W and you've determined that, then you're going to take this little handy dandy chart. And by the way, there's a little correction here. This one should be 20 inches. This first one should be 20 inches. So then I'm going to highlight because I have my handy dandy measurement here, and it's the same for my top and for my bottom. I'm just going to erase that. And I'm going to go ahead and just highlight that entire line because this is my W. And that's what I'm going to use for all of these measurements here. So this is everything that I need to make my jacket. It's like this. There's a whole formula for these coats, and so I took the time to do all the math for you. So this one is mine. Now, if you are if your W, right, from top to bottom, so this is going to be mine. So mine is 55 inches, right? So the first thing that I have to do is I have to mark this. So my W is 55 inches. That means from this end to this end, I'm going to mark 55 inches. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I get ready to cut my rectangle, I want to know which direction. So I'm going to go ahead and mark mine as 55 inches. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? Because I got this from here where it says wide. So I marked my W measurements that I took, and then the first measurement I'm going to mark on this little chart is this 55. Now this one is going to be 42 because that's the width of fabric. So this is the width of fabric that I'm using. And so this one's 42 this way by 55. Yours is going to be different depending on your size. Now, if your wide is less than 55, right? Then when we get ready to do some cuts, you're going to remove that width. So if you're a skinny mini, you're skinnier than me, then this part that goes where your body is going to be narrower than 55. But you need to still make it this width so that those sleeves will go to the end of your wrists. Otherwise, you're going to end up with floods and they're going to be too short. So make sure that you're marking that correctly. So you're saying, wow, she's a big girl. That's fine. When we get ready to cut this portion of the garment, that's where you're going to take that excess off, okay? So I hope this is making sense. Does anybody have any questions up until this point? All right, so that's the first thing. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, now that I have these measurements, how I'm going to lay this out. So I'm going to go over here to my other table. So what you have is I have laid out a piece of fabric that I've already washed. It's a couple of yards of fabric. I noticed when I washed it that it has like a little cut. Probably one of my grandkids thought it would be cute to cut that. So I'm going to have to work around that, but that's fine. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is my lining fabric, that it is washed and dried. If you're working with yardage, probably at least 2 yards for this, that you're going to need to make a cut in there. And the cut that I'm going to do is making sure that this is straight of grain. And so in order to do that, I'm just going to take a rotary cutter, and I'm just going to take a little snippet of this, and I'm going to pull it. And the reason I do that is because I want this garment on straight of grain. And so if you notice, when I lay this down, even though one side was cut with a rotary cutter previously, this is like wider in some areas and narrower. So now when I'm working with this piece, and I know a lot of people don't like their fabric ripped at the fabric store, this is now straight of grain. And so when I line this up now, this is going to be, the threads are going to be running vertically and horizontally straightwise. All right, so I'm just going to lay this out, and I'm going to have to measure. So my W was 55. So here is where I take my 55. So I'm going to have to take this piece, and I'm actually probably going to add, instead of making it just 55, I have to see if I can eliminate this piece, or I may have to patch it up with something. I'm not sure yet, maybe some bone ash. But if it doesn't work out, then I'll use something else. So this has been washed and pressed. It has not been starched, and I don't want to starch it. And then I'm going to measure 55 inches. So I'm just going to take this big long tape measure. And because I'm going to be quilting this on my machine, I'm going to probably add 1 or 2 inches on either side, probably at least 1 or 2. And then I'm going to trim my rectangle after I get done with it. So I'm just going to come through here, and this is 53. I have a couple of these healing mats butted up together on a plastic folding table, because that works pretty well. And I just want to make sure that I'm going to have enough for my fabric. Now that I see that it's going to be enough, I'm going to go ahead and trim. Instead of being 55, I have it at 58, which gives me 3 extra inches. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to find that edge, and I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other side. I'm just going to take a nip with a rotary cutter. So if you want to see what that nip looks like, it's just a nip like this, and then I'm going to rip it straight of grain, just like that. And so now I have this giant rectangle. And what I'm going to do with this rectangle that is now 58 inches, I'm going to measure it the other way, right? So I said I was going to be working with 42 inches. So let me see what I have this direction. And so some fabric is wider, depending on where you are, what country you're in, your width of fabric will be different, right? And so my width of fabric is going to be 42 inches is what I'm using of usable fabric, right? So let's go here. And this one is 44, which is perfect because remember I had a little bit of damaged. So I'm going to not trim any of this. So I'm going to be quilting this panel, and it's 44 by 58, which is bigger than what I need. So I'm going to cut batting out that's this size, and I'm going to be doing a quilt as you go for my rectangle. If you have a quilt and that's what you're using, an old quilt, you can go ahead and start cutting yours. You won't have to do what I'm doing. But I'm going to add batting to this entire rectangle. I'm going to give it a hard press and put it on my frame. And I always align it with my selvage. And then I'm going to make sure that my quilt blocks are all going to fit. So if you noticed, I just used leftover jelly roll pieces that are 4.5 inches by 2.5 inches, and I cut them and I put them together. And this is just a 9 patch, and these are 4.5 inches. And so I'm going to lay these out to make sure that I have enough of these because I'm going to be making my quilt sandwich. Now, I really don't need batting. If I wanted to make this entire bog coat with flannel inside this and make it so that it was a drapier coat, I could. The only thing that I'm going to do is when I lay out these pieces is just to make sure that my seams are going in up, that these are going this way and these are going this way. So these blocks are just going opposites. And so I think I have enough of these blocks to make my quilted sandwich. And so that's all I want is oops, look, there's a star there. Guess what I could do? If I wanted to throw a star inside my jacket somewhere, I could, but not today. And so it looks like I am about 6 blocks shy. These are my scraps. These are all leftovers. Nothing goes to waste in my sewing room. So I'm just going to lay this one here because I didn't want two things that were alike touching. Just kind of picky like that. Like that. Maybe this one will come on this side. And so just like this, I'm going to be laying out all of my pieces enough to cover this giant rectangle, and this entire thing can get now quilted. Now, if you want to do a quilt as you go method, what I could do is I could literally add my batting and then just join one row and then sew straight lines this way and then attach this one to the entire thing like this by laying it down, sewn together, sew this way, and then quilt the next section. You can quilt this in your domestic machine. It's not so large that you can't do this on a regular domestic machine. But this is how I'm going to kind of put together my entire rectangle, is by putting all of my jelly roll scraps to use and putting them into this coat. So that's what I'm going to be doing for homework. But before I do that, let me show you where you're going to be cutting your jacket in case you already have your rectangle, okay? So let me switch. Does anybody have any questions at what I've shown you guys so far? All right. And let me go in here. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you what to do for the neck hole, okay? So far, so good. I think everybody's understanding what I'm saying. Oh, you guys like those colors? These are all leftovers, literally from my scrap heap. And they're just 4.5 inches by 2.5 inches. They're let's see, Brenda from Mount Scrapmore uses those in her potato chip block, but I just make 9 patches out of mine. I do this all the time. I sew 4.5-inch strips into these 2 patches, and then I save them in a giant box. And then these all become my scrap projects because they're so easy. So if you have a ton of Jelly Roll strips in the same color family, just do them like this, and they're so easy. All right, so now that I have that, I need some other measurements, right? And let me move this little guy up here. So you're going to need other measurements for your stuff. So let me go ahead and do your neck hole. I'm going to flip my camera. And you see this little example? It says 2 inches by 5 inches by 7 inches. So let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to measure this. This is your neck template that you need. I have this right here, and I'm going to show you on my computer the large size. So let me do this, and let me share my desktop. Can you guys see that? So this is the neck template that we're going to be building. You need a rectangle that's 7 inches across by 5 inches tall, and then we're going to put some registration marks on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to take this, and I've marked it at 7 inches right here. And so this line is 7. And I'm just going to add this line all the way down. I'm going to use my scissors. And let me make sure that I have good paper scissors and not my fabric scissors, because that would make me really sad. And I'm just going to cut this like this, right at that line. The next measurement that I need for this is 7 inches this way. I need it to be 5 inches this way. So I'm just going to measure 5 inches this way. To make sure that I'm cutting it fairly square, I'm just going to measure from both edges like this, lining that up, and then I'm going to connect this line. And so now I have the size that I need. This is the side that I don't need. I move like this. Now that I have it, this is my 7-inch direction, right? This way. That's my longer side. And this is my 5-inch direction. My shorter side. I'm going to be measuring 2 inches from this way. And let me see if I can reduce my exposure so you can see better. Okay. Sometimes when there's too many lights, it gets to be kind of hard to see. Okay, 7 inches this way, 5 inches this way. I'm going to measure 2 inches from my upper edge. So this is a 2.5 inch ruler. So I can lay the 1/2 inch mark right there. And I'm just going to draw a line all the way across like this. Kind of a dashed line. And what I'm making is my neck template. So now that I have this dashed line, and you can use a marker if you want, just so that you can see it better. Just kind of using a dashed line across. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of these two, and I'm going to mark what I need. So this is the center of these two. And I'm going to mark the middle. See my line right there. And I need this middle so that I can kind of align my arches. So for this particular thing, I'm going to make an oval, right? And so for my oval, I'm just going to take my wrist moves this way, and I'm just going to connect it like this. And so I'm rounding that edge using an oval, so it's kind of long. I don't know if you can see that. And I'm going to come in here, and starting at that edge, I'm going to barely shave that edge and come in, and I'm going to stop right there. And it should look like this, like a house. Then I'm going to take this again, and again, I'm going to use my wrist like this because your wrist makes a nice thing, and I'm going to make this like this. It's going to be like a curve like this. The reason this is centered is because when we cut our neck hole, we want to use these to line it up with the shoulders, because what you don't want is that neck hole to fall too far down the back of your neck. All right. And so we're going to go like this, and you're going to need those measurements, these registration marks, when you line this up on your coat itself. Oh, I have a question from Tina. Why is this called a bog coat? Because the earliest evidence of this garment was found from a prehistoric garment that was found in a bog. And that was a great question for you to ask me. See how this is not quite there? I'm going to have to take, got a flat edge, I'm just going to have to take and sliver trim that. Just like this. So that it's more like a little oval like this. And so now I have my neck template. It should look like this. It's kind of like a football, but the center of the football is over here. So the laces are on the upper part. 2 inches, mark this line, fold it in quadrants, trace it, and this is your neck piece right here. All right, so now let's look at the garment itself. So I'm going to share my desktop. I'm going to come up out of here. And let me show you. So for those of you who guys are visual learners, I'm just going to go into Google, and I'm going to do bog coat, just so you can see what it looks like. Bog coat can be a variety of things, but where we're going, and so you can see this one here, this is a bog coat that has no batting. So this person has taken the bog coat, like we're doing right now, and she has no batting. She simply used 2 layers of fabric that she likes. It's very drapey, and she made it look like a house coat. She did not smooth out the edges. She just sewed the entire rectangle together and added a pocket because she wanted to make a house coat, and she has it so where it's got short sleeves, right? Other bog coats, if you look on Google, you can just go to images, and other bog coats are slightly different. So like this one is a bog jacket. So it's like a short version of what we're making. If you keep going and looking around, some of them look like a kimono like this. And ours is going to look a little bit like that until we get it fitted. And the closest thing I've found to what we're making, by the way, there's like a mathematical formula that says like 1/2 and 1/4 and 1 so many, but I did all of the math and made my chart so that you guys don't have to do that. Let me see. If you want to see something, this is similar to what we're making. It's going to end up like this, but this is a little short version of it. Okay, so now that you see where we're going with our bog jacket, and the reason it's called a bog coat is because the original garment was found in a peat bog, and it was a prehistoric garment, so it's the earliest form of clothing. Was that reason? All right, so now that we've got it, now I've got to show you where to measure your big rectangle. Okay? All right, so let me go to the 2 cameras. So now that you have your little neck template, you're going to use these lines to line it up before you cut stuff out, because it's going to go like this. So let me show you how to measure. So the first thing that you're going to do, if you notice, you're going to have to do some cuts. So from here to here, from across the bottom, you're going to write a number 2. So you're going to go over here to this chart. Mine says number 2 is 11 inches. So my number 2 is right here, and I'm going to draw a number 2. So I'm going to take this side of my rectangle, and I'm going to come in, and I'm going to measure it, right? And I'm not going to cut it yet. I'm just going to measure it. And I'm going to draw a dashed line with a washable pencil or fabric pencil, because I'm going to want to mark a dashed line. So this is my number 2. I'm going to do the same thing from this side, and I'm going to draw a number 2 just like that. And so when I'm laying out my giant rectangle, I'm probably going to use 2 folding tables for this. This measurement of mine that says 11 inches is what this is going to be, this first cut right here. So mine is going to be 11 inches from the sides going inward. This is a dashed line. This is not a cut. Only this is the cut. Okay? So this will be 11 for me. Yours will be different depending on what your chart says. Now I have number 3. I have one that says 3. The distance between these 2 dashed lines is number 3. So for me, number 3 is the distance between these 2 spaces. So for me, it's going to be 22 inches. So I'm going to measure from the center and measure 22 inches and then do these dashed lines, etc. So this is important for you to know. Now, you have this measurement from the top to this cut right here on either side. And that one is going to be your measurement number 1. So this right here is number 1. So I'm going to draw number 1 on mine. So this is number 1. From the top to this first cut for me is number 1. And for me, it's 21 inches. Now remember to fix that. If you're this tiny person here, this should be 20 inches and 20 inches. Those are the same. So mine is going to be, number 1 is going to be 21 inches. So I'm just going to label that so that I know. I'm going to take the top, I'm going to measure down, and I'm going to measure 21 inches. So I'm going to do 21. I'm going to label mine 21. From the corners, go down and measure 21. And then I'm going to come in 11. Is that making sense? So I'm coming from here, the top corner, across the wide, and I'm going to come down 21 inches, and then I'm going to cut. The only cut I'm making is right here. Then in the center, the neck hole, I'm going to take this section and I'm going to measure it halfway. So half of 21 for me is like 10.5 inches. So I'm going to come in 10.5 inches, and then I'm going to center this neck hole in this space like this. And I'm going to face it this way. So I'm going to put this to the front and this to the back. So you're going to want to label this as the front and this to the back. So the smaller portion of your neck is the back and this to the front. And so you're going to center this exactly in the middle. You're going to line this up with the front, and then you're going to line this up with the center of your shoulder. So these are actually your shoulders. For me, it's going to be 10.5 inches. And then I'm going to make this cut. I'm going to come in from there. And this cut is half of your number 1. You're going to center this, trace around it, and cut. There's only 3 cuts. This one coming in from the sides, so these 2, and then this one with the neck hole. You're only making 3 cuts. When you're done with that, then you're ready to fit and pin. And remember, if your W is not this wide, when you get ready to adjust your coat, if your coat is too wide in this area, you can remove a little bit of this fabric right here. So to make adjustments for this coat, if this is too wide, you can take and remove a little bit of fabric from here. And when you remove fabric from here, you're removing it from these sides. I hope this is making sense. So as you remove it from here, you're removing it from the sides of the garment. Is that making sense to everybody, what I've shared so far? Okay, so now you have homework. So your homework is for you to go ahead and measure yourself Figure out where your W line is. Remember, W is the width of your rectangle, and that's the measurement there. Keep track of that. Draw it on your paper. Put your W measurements. Go ahead and measure your number 2s, your number 3, and then write the numbers for your number 1. And then if you want to, you can finish marking those other lines with more details. So don't cut anything else until you are sure that your big rectangle is the correct size and that you have all of these markings for your 1 cut, 2 cut, 3 cuts. I hope this is making a whole lot of sense. All right, friends, this is all for tonight. For those of you who are jump starting on this and you're already using a quilt, you can do that. Go ahead and use your quilt. But next time that we're together, what I'm going to be working on is actually fitting the seams. I'm going to be using on mine a serger, but you're going to be fitting these side seams to make sure that your coat actually fits the way you want to on the sleeves and that it fits you sideways. So the next time that we're together, you're going to pin the coat with me, and then I'm going to show you how to make adjustments for the sleeves and for the sides for those of you who are very, very thin. All right, friends, if you have any questions, please post those in the comments or in the thing. So the fabric is not folded. So let me see any other questions. So the fabric is not folded at all. Yes. So all of the measurements are when your fabric is open. And let me show you. Let me flip my camera so you can see. So when you're laying this out, this should be completely open. There's no folding anywhere. So I am laying out, if you notice, my full width of my fabric, and all of this is literally just the full width. So I'm going to make a few more blocks to finish this because this is all my scraps. So this is completely open. This is why I'm going to use 2 folding tables for this. So this is not going to be at any time folded in half like a regular garment. This is just a single piece and there's no waste. There's nothing left over. So when you're done sewing this, and let me just kind of do a miniature so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to make a little teeny tiny miniature, right? So let's pretend that this is my bog coat. Let me just use a plain piece of paper somewhere. Now I'm going to use a piece of freezer paper. All right. And we're going to pretend that this piece of freezer paper is my bog coat. Let me just grab, very crooked. So I'm going to have, this is my little miniature pretend bog coat. I'm going to have measurement 1 is this side, and I'm going to stop there. I'm going to come in, measurement 1. I'm going to come in, right? I'm going to cut the neck hole right here. And then I'm going to come in. And so I'm going to cut here with it completely open, cut here, and cut this ginormous neck. And so your garment is going to have only 3 cuts, this neck hole and the 2 sides. And when we sew it back together, we're going to be bringing this side in like this side in like this. Of course, it's going to be a lot different when it's an actual garment. And then these are going to come in like this. And so this garment will sew like this. Of course, this will come in because I'm just kind of estimating with my eyeballs. And so this is what it's going to look like. Your garment is this top part on here in your diagram is actually the sleeves. That's why it has to be 55 for me wide so that it's long and not too short. And then this bodice part, it's going to come in, and I'm going to just come in a little bit more. That's your actual body on this garment. So this will come in like this. And so there's how it sews. And then I'm going to sew across here, and I'm going to sew across here. So there's really only 2 seams to sew on this. And I'm going to be using my serger because I don't want to have to finish this in any other way. So I hope that my little baby miniature bog coat, and this is why I have this diagram, because this is how it comes together. And then this is your diagram so that you can mark your own body markings. And I hope this makes sense. So if you have not ever made a garment like this, please watch this video again. Read the handout very carefully. Measure yourself. And if you have any questions, please leave me a message in the comments. Give this a thumbs up. But these 2 documents are super important. And make sure that you're marking your neck template, the front and the back. The wider portion goes towards the front of your garment, and then the smaller part goes to the back. If you flip it the wrong way, you're going to end up with a giant neck hole that's way too wide back here, and you're going to be upset because your coat has a gaping neck. Okay? I hope my little tiny baby bog coat makes sense. But you want the wider part of the neck to the front and then the little part to the back. So this is, I think it's going to be super cute. So I'm going to get busy because tonight I'm going to finish 6 more blocks. They only take about 5 minutes. If you don't have blocks, one of these blocks takes literally 5 minutes to make, because all you're doing is you're sewing a bunch of little rectangles together. And then you're doing it like a 9 patch, but you're flipping directions. So you're going sideways, up, and then you're doing this. And guess what you can do whenever you match them up? You can put them so where they're opposites. And then you never have any matching seams. And so you can make an unlimited number of these. Let me see. What other questions do I have? Will we be using binding along the edges? I am, because I'm not actually using a finished quilt. If you're using a finished quilt, those edges should already be bound and you don't need that. Can you still do this if you don't have a serger? Absolutely. We're going to be using pinking shears for those of you who don't have a serger, because this has nice big 1/2 inch seams. And so you have enough that you can use a zigzag stitch, or you can have a serger, or you can even do a decorative blanket stitch with yarn on the inside if you want to make it nice and finished. So you don't have to have a serger. If you don't have one, use what you have. You don't need new gadgets. You don't need fancy things to make beautiful things with the Jelly Roll Club. All of my things are free. Please go download those. Share this channel with your friends. I appreciate you guys so much for supporting my channel. And if you can subscribe and share, this is what enables me to provide all of these little things to you for free. I just make them in my spare time, and I share them with you guys because I hope that a lot of new people will be enjoying our craft. All right, everybody, I will see you guys in 2 weeks for lesson 2 on how to fit this together, fit it to your body so that it looks good. And I think this is going to be awesome. And for those of you who are not brand new, you could probably put this together without a lot of my help. And don't forget to share those pictures on the Facebook page. So if you go to my Facebook page, you can see a lot of the stuff that we do. If you click on Facebook and you go to the Jelly Roll Club, you can see all of the things that's already in our feed from the last one. If you miss any of the handouts or whatever, I try to put it in there. But I just dug out a serger that's like 40 years old out of the closet that used to be in a dry cleaner's, and I cleaned it up and I just repaired it, and I'm going to be using it for this project. But anything that we have is there. Just go ahead and jump on my page and get that stuff done. For those of you who are making Krabby Patty, I've been finishing up. So look what I've got here. This is, by the way, just a photo backdrop, and I use that as a design wall. And look what I've got here. Krabby Patty's almost done across the top, and I'm ready to start adding my fish that I made and my other creatures down the sides. And so I'm excited about that because I have a grandson who really loves sea creatures, and that is his Christmas present. All right, everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. I will be back in 2 weeks to finish this bog coat with you guys, and I'm super excited. All right, everybody. Give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Bye. Have a good one. Have a great week.